Rick Halden never asked questions about the cargo he moved. He flew a small trade ship, quiet and fast, perfect for slipping past patrols. His job was simple: pick up the goods, drop them off, and collect his credits. No emotions, no problems. That's how he survived this long. That's how he stayed alive in a galaxy that sold anything, even life. This time was no different, or so he thought. The pickup was on a silent moon called Orus 9, far from any patrol routes. The contact wore a black helmet and didn't speak. Just handed Rick a cargo crate with red warning lights flashing on the edges. Rick scanned the container, no biosigns on the outside, just the word "Live High Value" glowing in red. "What is it?" Rick asked, out of habit more than curiosity. The man said nothing, just raised 2 fingers. Then pointed at Rick's ship. 2 passengers? Maybe trained animals or rare pets. Rick shrugged and loaded the crate into the lower hold. As soon as the ship's doors closed, he blasted off. No questions, no delay. But something felt off. A few hours into the flight, he heard something. At first it was just a sound in the air system, soft, rhythmic, maybe a leak. He got up to check. The sound grew clearer as he approached the hold. His hand froze when he realized what it was. Crying, not mechanical noise, not a bird or a beast, but the sound of a child crying. Rick unlocked the hold and stepped inside. The crate sat in the corner, sealed but shaking slightly. The crying became louder. He hesitated, then keyed in the override code. The lid hissed and opened slowly. Inside were 3 figures. A woman with pale blue skin, long silver hair, and golden eyes looked up at him, her arms wrapped around 2 small children, one of them sobbing quietly into her shoulder. They were thin, bruised, and scared. "Please," the woman said in broken English, "don't let them take us." Rick took a step back. His mind raced. This wasn't cargo. This was a family, living beings, not animals, not pets, people. He tapped the control panel again, scanning for ID tags. The system flagged them as Yularians, a species once native to a peaceful planet called Yulara. That world had been sold for resources 5 years ago. Its people were scattered, hunted, or traded like rare goods. Some even said they were extinct. Rick swallowed hard. He remembered Yulara. He'd flown near it once, green oceans, glowing forests, a quiet jewel in the stars. And now here they were, packed like cargo in his hold. I wasn't told," Rick muttered, his voice low. The woman stared at him, not begging, not crying, just watching, waiting for his decision. Her children clung to her. Their eyes held no hope, just fear and silence. That silence screamed louder than any alarm. Rick closed the crate softly, locking it again, not to trap them, but to hide them. His ship's IWREN blinked on the comm screen. "Cargo status, Captain?" "It's secure," Rick replied, forcing his voice to stay calm. "ETA to drop-off point. 18 hours, WREN said. Reminder, delivery marked as sensitive. Client requests 0 interference." Rick nodded slowly, but his hands were shaking, for the first time in years. His job felt wrong. Deeply wrong. He walked back to the cockpit and sat down. The stars drifted by, cold and distant, but something warm was rising in his chest, a feeling he thought he'd buried long ago. He looked at the control panel, then at the security feed showing the crate in the hold. The sound of the child's soft cries still echoed in his ears. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. "Ren," he said after a long pause, "what happens if I don't make the delivery?" "Violation of contract," the AI replied. "Client may place bounty. Potential threat level high." Rick sighed. He wasn't afraid of threats, not really. But this time, the choice wasn't about money. It was about something more, something bigger, something he couldn't explain yet. He stared at the stars again and whispered, "They're not cargo." And deep inside, Rick Halden knew. This job just became something else. Rick Halden stared at the stars ahead, but his mind wasn't flying with them. It was trapped in the cargo hold below, where an alien mother and her 2 frightened children lay inside a crate that was never meant to hold life. Every second that passed made the silence in his ship heavier, louder than the engines humming beneath his feet. He had broken rules before. He'd smuggled illegal tech, stolen medicine, even rare animals from jungle moons. But this was different. These weren't items or creatures, they were people. And not just any people, Yularians. A species the galaxy had forgotten, crushed by greed and war. Now scattered like dust across the stars. Ren, the ship's eye, blinked onto the console screen with her usual cold tone. "Captain, biometric readings in cargo hold remain active. Do you wish to alert the buyer of premature opening?" Rick didn't answer at first. He just leaned back in his chair, staring at the stars as if they could offer advice. "Ren, delete the last 2 hours of cargo log and reroute the tracking beacon to loop system scans," he said finally. "Warning." Ren replied, "Such action is in breach of delivery contract and could result in legal or criminal pursuit." "Just do it," Rick said quietly. The screen blinked twice. "Loop initiated, tracking disabled, log deleted." Rick rubbed his face with his hands. He knew what he had just done. He'd crossed a line, not just with the buyer, but with the entire code of survival he'd built for years. No attachments, no questions, no interference. That code had kept him alive, but now it's cracking. He made his way back to the cargo hold. The crate was still locked, but quiet. He opened it again. Slowly this time. The alien mother flinched at the sound. Pulling her children closer, Rick raised both hands, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, kneeling down to her level. "My name is Rick. I pilot this ship. I didn't know what was inside until a few hours ago. I swear it." The woman stared at him with her golden eyes. "My name is Lyra. These are my children, Yanni and Sol. We were promised freedom, but they put us in cages and sold us like meat." Her voice shook with exhaustion. Her children looked at Rick with wide eyes, silent, but curious, not afraid anymore. Just waiting. Rick nodded. "Listen, I can't go back to the buyer. They'll be looking for me soon. But I know places where people like you can be safe. It's not easy, but it's better than a cage." Lyra narrowed her eyes. "Why would a human help us? Your kind helped destroy our planet." Rick didn't flinch. He looked her straight in the eyes. "My kind also died on Mars. Not every human has a home to return to. Some of us are just trying to survive like you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Yanni, the smaller child, reached out and touched Rick's hand. It was small, glowing faintly blue. Rick didn't move. He let the child rest his tiny fingers against his skin. Lyra relaxed. Just a little. Rick closed the crate again, but left it unlocked this time. He returned to the cockpit and began changing course. The new destination, Haven 9, a broken-down colony station in the outer drift, known for hiding refugees and forgotten people. As he punched in the coordinates, Ray-In spoke again. "Captain, you have received an encrypted message from Central Trade Network." "Play it," Rick said. Without turning, a hologram popped up. A man in a silver suit appeared. His face was blurred. His voice was sharp. "Captain Halden, failure to deliver live cargo 7BX-12 within contracted window will result in a 25,000 credit bounty placed on your head. Further delay will be considered theft under Galactic trade law. No negotiations." The hologram ended. Rick smiled dryly. So it had begun. He was now a wanted man, all because he opened the box and found something no one in the galaxy wanted to see: a family. He leaned forward and whispered to himself, "They ordered me to sell them, but I'm going to keep them safe, no matter what it costs." The stars outside continued to shift. The journey to Haven 9 had begun. And Rick Halden had just broken more than a trade contract. He had broken the code that made him a smuggler, and in doing so, he had started to become something else entirely, something dangerous, something human. Rick Halden sat in the pilot seat as the stars stretched into long white lines across the viewing glass. Haven 9 was still days away, but he had done it. He had changed course. He had chosen to run instead of deliver. And now he was no longer just a smuggler. He was a traitor to the very system that fed him. In the lower hold, Lyra and her children were quiet. Rick had given them warm food and spare blankets. The little one, Yanni, had even smiled at him once. But Rick knew it was only the beginning. He had broken a rule. And rules in the black trade always broke back harder. WREN's voice echoed across the deck. "Captain, unidentified ship on intercept course. Speed and trajectory suggest pursuit. ETA 15 minutes. Rick's hands tightened around the flight stick. He tapped the sensor panel. A ship was closing in fast. No transponder, no signal, no ID. That meant one thing, a private bounty hunter. Open communication channel, Rick said. The screen blinked to life. A face appeared. Not human, sharp metal skin with glowing green eyes and a voice like grinding steel. Rick Holden, the machine said. You have property that belongs to the trade syndicate. Prepare to be boarded. Not today. Rick whispered and cut the channel. The engines roared. As Rick pushed the throttle, he dove toward a gas cloud nearby, hoping to use the radiation field to break the hunter's lock. Behind him, the bounty ship followed without hesitation. WREN's tone. Shields at 60%. Radiation interference detected. Navigation systems unstable. Good, Rick muttered. Let it all go unstable. Let the hunter lose sight. He swerved the ship between the glowing clouds of orange and green. Electric storms sparked through the mist. The hull vibrated, but held. Lyra appeared at the doorway to the cockpit, her eyes wide, her children behind her. What is happening? She asked. Rick didn't look back. Someone's trying to take you back. I'm trying to make sure that doesn't happen. She stepped closer. You should have delivered us. You still can. We'll say nothing. Rick turned to her. Just for a second, and leave you to be sold again. No thanks. A shockwave hit the ship. The bounty hunter had fired a pulse cannon. The blast rocked them sideways. WREN reported systems failing, shields collapsing. Rick pulled hard to the left, skimming the edge of a massive asteroid inside the cloud. He remembered a trick from a decade ago, one he had learned during the Mars riots. He diverted all power to the rear deflectors and released a flare drone. The flare exploded in the mist like a starburst. The radiation lit it up brighter than any engine signature. The hunter's ship followed the flare, just as Rick spun the ship beneath the asteroid and powered down. Everything went silent. No lights, no sounds. Even Ren was off. Dead silence in the dark. They floated there for 2 long minutes. Rick could feel his heart pounding. The kids held onto their mother. Lyra didn't speak. She simply placed a hand on Rick's shoulder and waited. Then Ren came back online. Minimal power restored. Pursuit ship has moved out of range. We are not detected. Rick exhaled for the first time in minutes. He brought the lights back up slowly. They were alive, for now. Lyra looked at him with something different in her eyes. Not fear, not suspicion, something closer to trust. You didn't have to do that, she said. You risked everything. Rick gave a half smile. I think everything is already gone. Might as well do something right before it ends. He turned back to the controls and reset their course to Haven 9. But deep in his gut he knew that Hunter wouldn't give up and the bounty was only going to grow. Somewhere out in space, the trade syndicate would be watching, listening, preparing. Rick had thrown the first punch. Now the galaxy was going to punch back, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was fighting for something real. Not money, not survival, but a family that never asked to be saved. And he wasn't going to let them down, not now. Not ever. Haven 9 was not what Rick remembered. He had been there once years ago for a weapons deal that never happened. Back then the station floated like a rusted coin in the edge of nowhere. Now it looked worse. Parts of the outer ring were barely holding together. Docking lights flickered like dying stars, and the welcome signal was just a repeated code-broken station. No rules, no questions. Rick's ship latched onto dock port 3. He ran a system sweep to mask the ship's ID again. Lyra and her children stood behind him in silence. They had been quiet since the escape from the bounty hunter. Even the little one, Yanni, no longer played with the ship lights. When the airlock opened, the station's air hit like mold and burnt wires, the smell of old lives and forgotten things. Rick stepped out first, scanning the shadows. There were people here, humans, aliens, hybrids. But no one made eye contact. Everyone here was running from something. He turned to Lyra. Stay close if anyone asks. You're my cargo crew. Family permit clearance code. No one will check unless they want trouble. They moved through the rusted corridors. The metal groaned beneath their feet. Graffiti covered the walls and a dozen alien scripts. Rick led them to a small corner lounge deep in the lower district. A place called Dust Haven, more of a memory than a business. There he found him. Voss, an old contact from a time Rick tried to forget. Voss was part machine, part man, and all trouble. He had one glowing red eye. 1 golden tooth and a reputation for selling anything to anyone, Rick Vos said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Didn't think I'd see you crawling back here, especially not with this kind of heat behind you. I need shelter for a few nights. Rick replied, off-grid clean room, no records. Vos laughed. You need a lot these days, and I don't run a charity. You know that. Rick pulled out a data chip. Vos took the chip and nodded slowly. Deal. But one thing, you owe me a favor. Not now, but later. You say yes or you sleep in the cold. Rick hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Fine. Vos pointed down the corridor. Room 11C, not fancy, but dry and unlisted. Keep your guests quiet. As they walked away, Lyra leaned in. You trust him? Not even a little, Rick replied. Inside the room, the walls were patched with metal sheets and power cables, but there were beds, a heater, clean water. The kids finally smiled when they saw the blankets. Rick stood guard by the door as Lyra helped them rest. She looked at Rick with eyes that held questions. He answered without her speaking. This place is temporary. We won't stay long, just enough time to find a safer route, one that doesn't have bounty hunters waiting. Lyra nodded, but before she could speak, the room's screen blinked to life. A silent message played. Encrypted, marked urgent. Rick opened it and froze. It was a scan of Haven 9 station records. The trade syndicate had just purchased a stake in the station's central core. Private ownership transfer. Effective in 1 week. Lyra saw the screen, and her voice dropped cold. They are coming here. They will own this place, and us. Rick stared at the words. A slow burn rising in his chest. He had thought Haven 9 was forgotten, safe, hidden. But the syndicate was spreading like a disease, buying everything, even the corners of space where ghosts lived. Suddenly everything felt tighter, darker. He had brought Lyra and the kids to a trap disguised as safety. Rin's voice came through his wristband quietly. Captain, there is movement near the dock. 3 unidentified figures scanning your ship. I believe they are hunters. Rick's jaw clenched. The net is closing faster than he expected, and the ghosts of Haven 9 were starting to whisper again. Rick Halden had run from many things in his life government's rivals regret. But this time he wasn't just running, he was choosing, and the choice was tearing him apart. The room on Haven 9 felt smaller than before. The air thicker. Lyra sat with her children, wrapped in a thermal blanket. Their soft breathing was the only peaceful sound in the room. Rick stood near the door, staring at the blinking screen on his wristband. A message from Vos had just come in, short and sharp. Your favor is ready. Meet me at Core Sector 12. Bring your courage. Rick already knew this wouldn't be a favor. It would be a test. One that could break what little was left of his soul. He walked the corridor back to Vos's sector. Every step felt heavier. Haven 9 creaked around him like a dying ship. People whispered, eyes followed. He could feel the weight of his bounty growing with every hour. Vos was waiting in the shadows of a derelict bar. His cybernetic eye glowed red as Rick approached. I've got something for you. Something that clears your debt. A clean route out of the system. Fake IDs, fuel, and your ship wiped clean from syndicate logs. But there's a price. Rick crossed his arms. What is it? Vos smiled. There's a man here. Goes by the name Jorik Venn. Used to be a rebel commander. Now he's hiding in the ghost tunnels of Haven 9. The syndicate wants him gone. And you're going to deliver him to them. Rick's breath caught. Jorik Venn was no stranger. He had saved Rick's life years ago during the Mars uprising, pulled him from a burning ship and carried him across a battlefield. They had never met again, but Rick never forgot his face. That's your favor, Vos said. Hand him over and you're free. Rick didn't answer. He turned and walked away, back to room 11C. Back to Lyra and the kids. When he entered, Lyra looked up. She saw something in his eyes. Not fear, but conflict. What did he ask of you? She said quietly. Rick hesitated. He could lie, but what was the point anymore? He wants me to betray a man, a good man, someone who once saved me, and if I do it, you'll be safe. We all will. Lyra's voice was firm. And if you don't, we run again until they catch us, until we're sold, or worse. Lyra stood slowly. Her children clung to her legs. You must choose, Rick, but not between life and death. Choose between who you were and who you want to become. Rick left before he could speak. He walked the old maintenance paths of Haven 9, the ones only smugglers and ghosts knew. He found Jorik Venn in an abandoned tower, older now, scarred, but his eyes were sharp and unbroken. "You're here to collect me," Jorik said, not a question. "Just truth." Rick shook his head. "I'm here to warn you," Jorik smiled. "Then you've changed. Back then you were just a runner." "I'm still running," Rick said, "but not from myself." Jorik stood. "Then let's make sure your new family doesn't have to." Together, they set the trap. They leaked false data to Voss, claiming Rick had captured Jorik and would make the trade in Dock 4. When Voss arrived with syndicate agents, Rick and Jorik ambushed them. Blasters fired, sparks flew. The station alarm screamed. Lyra had already taken the children to the ship. Ren was ready. Engines hot, systems masked. Rick and Jorik fought, side by side like soldiers from another life. They disabled the agents, scrambled the trackers, and vanished into the service tunnels. Minutes later, Rick boarded his ship, breathing hard, bloody, but alive. He looked at Lyra. She said nothing. She just placed her hand on his arm. "You chose us," she whispered. Rick nodded. "I chose what felt right, not what felt easy." Worien launched the ship into deep drift, leaving Haven 9 behind. The stars stretched again. The hunt would continue. But Rick had made his choice, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a smuggler. He felt like something more. He felt like a father. The stars were darker. Now the space around Rick Halden's ship felt colder. He had burned every bridge he had, broken every deal, fought through fire to protect a family that was never supposed to be his. Now there was no more hiding, only one path forward. Expose the ones who wanted to keep the galaxy silent. Lyra stood beside him in the cockpit. Her children sat quietly behind them, drawing shapes on a display screen. They had grown more confident, more alive. But Rick knew time was running out. "We can't keep running," he said. "We need to strike back, or this will never end." Lyra nodded. Her fingers closed around a glowing crystal embedded in a pendant. "This holds the last memory stone of my people. It has the proof you need, names, routes, locations, where they captured us. If we show this to the galaxy, they'll know the truth." Rick activated the long-range communication scanner, but every major network was controlled by the syndicate. They could silence the story before it ever reached the public. Then he remembered something, a name. A rebel outpost hidden inside the shell of a broken planet. Once used during the Mars uprising, now off-grid, forgotten, but still alive. "We'll go to Theros 3, Rick said. "They have an old relay tower. If we can upload the data from there, everyone will see it. They won't be able to deny what the syndicate has done." The journey was dangerous. They had to pass through 3 restricted zones, avoid bounty hunters, dodge patrol scans, and fly without shields to stay invisible. During the journey, Rick taught the kids how to use the comms. Lyra taught them about stars. She told stories of Yalara, of songs that healed trees, and animals that danced in moonlight. They didn't just feel like passengers anymore. They felt like crew. When they reached Theros 3, it was worse than Rick remembered. Ash floated in the atmosphere like snow. The surface was black rock and burned soil, but the tower still stood. Twisted but functional, Rick and Lyra entered the base. Ren stayed on the ship with the children. Rick connected the crystal to the old system. The screen flickered to life. Rows and rows of data spilled across it. Trade logs, names of captured species, coordinates of slave markets disguised as research hubs, secret messages between syndicate leaders and corrupt government officials. "They didn't just take Yularians," Rick whispered. "They took everyone they could hide, even humans." As Rick prepared to send the data to the public network, WREN's voice came through his wristband. "Captain, unidentified ships are entering Theros orbit. Multiple targets. They are jamming external signals. They're trying to block the upload," Rick said. "We have seconds." Lyra stepped forward. "Take this file. Add my voice. Let them hear what they've done." Rick nodded and hit transmit. The screen pulsed. The tower hummed. The message went out to colonies, to ships, to underground networks and open news boards. Within minutes it was everywhere. The syndicate's secrets were no longer hidden. The galaxy reacted fast. Some humans were shocked, some angry, some refused to believe. But others stood up. Protests began on frontier stations. Rebel groups formed online. Even a few syndicate agents defected, saying they didn't sign up for slavery. Rick's bounty doubled overnight, but so did his legend. They called him the smuggler who said no, the captain who chose family over profit. Rick barely escaped Theros 3. Enemy ships rained fire on the old tower, But he and Lyra made it back to the ship in time. Ren blasted them out through an asteroid field, one engine sparking. But still flying, Rick collapsed in the pilot's seat. Exhausted, burned, bleeding, Lyra sat beside him. She held his hand gently. "You did it," she said. "You broke their silence." Rick gave a tired smile. "One battle at a time, still a long way to go." She looked at him with eyes full of something unspoken, then turned away and walked back to the children. Rick looked out at the stars. They still burned, still distant, but now they didn't feel so cold. Now they felt like hope. The stars stretched slowly across the sky as the ship drifted through the quiet of deep space. Rick Halden stood by the viewing panel, watching the distant lights flicker like forgotten memories. It had been weeks since Theros 3, since the message went out, since the galaxy finally saw the truth. The universe had changed, not completely, but something had shifted. People were speaking out, stations were questioning syndicate contracts, and whispers of rebellion were now growing into voices. Rick had changed too. He was no longer just a smuggler, no longer a man running from his past. He had chosen something different. He had chosen to protect instead of profit, to care instead of survive. Lyra walked into the cockpit carrying a cup of warmed synth fruit. Her silver hair reflected the soft lights above. She handed the cup to Rick and stood beside him. The silence between them was peaceful now. Not heavy, not afraid. The children were sleeping in the crew quarters. Ren had converted the storage room into a small play space. There were stars painted on the walls, a hand-drawn map of Yulara taped above the bed, crayons scattered across the floor. "They look happy," Rick said softly. "Like they belong." "They do," Lyra replied. "Thanks to you." Rick shook his head. "Not just me, all of us. You, them, even WREN. We're a crew now, maybe even more than that." There was a soft beeping on the console. A message coming through. Rick tapped the panel and watched a face appear. It was Jorik Van Rick, he said with a half-smile. "Your data shook the pillars. They're running scared, and we've started forming something real. A network, free colonies, places where no species is sold or hunted, places where families like Lyra's can live without fear." Rick nodded. "Send us coordinates. We'll help however we can." Jorik looked at him seriously. "You sure you're ready to fight again?" "You've already given enough." Rick smiled. "Not even close. We're just getting started." The message ended, and Rick turned to Lyra. "You still want to run, because I won't blame you. The safest thing would be to hide." Lyra shook her head. "We've hidden long enough. It's time to make sure this never happens to another family." They plotted a course to the new colony, a place called Ember Reach, built in the remains of an old mining moon, protected by rebels, welcoming to all species, a spark in the dark. As they flew, Rick thought about the first time he opened that crate, the fear in Lyra's eyes, the sound of Yanni crying. He remembered the moment he was ordered to sell them like cargo, and he remembered the choice he made instead. He had never expected to come part of their lives. He never imagined they would become part of his, but now he could not see the stars without thinking of them. They weren't cargo, they were family. WREN's voice came over the speakers. "Captain approaching Ember Reach in 10 minutes. Defensive shields, online docking codes, verified welcome message incoming." Rick looked at the stars one more time, then turned toward the future. He stepped into the crew room where the children were awake and laughing. They had drawn a picture of the ship, all 4 of them inside, even Ren. He smiled and knelt beside them. "You two ready to see a new home?" he asked. Yanni nodded. Sol giggled and hugged his leg. Lyra watched from the doorway, her eyes soft, her voice warm. "You gave us hope, Rick. You gave us more than that. You gave us a future." Rick stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, you gave that to me." The ship entered orbit above. Ember Reach lights from the colony sparkled below like a city of stars. Rick Halden had been many things, a smuggler, a runner, a shadow in the void. But now he was something else. He was a protector, a rebel, a father. And no matter what the galaxy threw at them next, he would face it with the family he chose. Not cargo family, always.